Hi, I'm Abby Crotty. I'm here in the PhocusWire studio with Nicole Kerr of Mozio and Cameron Jones from SilverRail. Thank you both so much for being here.
Hi.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So just to start things off, just a broad question about what developments in ground transportation do you see that are really connecting the dots of the traveler journey?
Yeah, so I think there's not that many examples when you think about all modes, connecting all modes together in sort of a single transaction. And I think it's still evolving. I think customer buyer behavior is still evolving as well. There's this view that, a customer might want to book everything in one transaction and then, with one journey planning experience, but I'm not sure that's the case. I think the segment of travel that has the constraint on inventory, so there's a limited number of seats left on a train as an example, that certainly would be part of a transaction and a booking. But the first and last mile, sometimes it's more information that people are more interested in because they want the flexibility to be able to choose their mode on the day. And we're seeing some examples of that. In Sweden, you actually can book a full trip. You can book the train plus a taxi plus the bus and so on. And that's working really well in that market. It's very much supply led, but there's not a lot of examples out there at the moment with a fully connected trip, really.
So like Cameron was saying, we really don't have very many examples. And so I think what we've done is, some of us do rail very, very well. And then others of us focus on ground transportation. And it's ideally linking those things up rather than having one that does everything. Focus on what you do really well. And so in ground transportation, it's really challenging to get quality that is the same all over the world. And that's something that we've been really focusing on is how do you make that level of quality consistent everywhere? And I think if we can line up and work with people like SilverRail, and then we can bring that full journey multimodal together.
Absolutely. And so is AI playing a role in bringing this all together or playing, a different role within the sector? What would you say are kind of the key areas where you're seeing that being implemented?
Yeah, I think AI is having an interesting impact in travel in general, and like everything at this conference has had AI in the title somewhere, and there's been a question around it. I think in ground transportation, especially when you have a really fragmented bunch of solutions, which you do when you're thinking first and last mile, from Lime bikes to taxis to tubes or whatever you want to travel on. But then there's a lot of information that comes into play as well. I'll give you a personal example. Recently, I booked a trip in northern Italy. And I spent 3 or 4 hours in Verona for lunch between origin and destination. And I had a lot of questions about, what do I do when I get there, and where can I store my luggage? And actually, AI gave me all of that information that helped me get to a transaction. But it didn't actually do the booking for me. But it helped me support my purchasing behavior or my purchasing decision with all extra information that you wouldn't necessarily find on a lot of the sort of the retailer sites, supplier sites. So I think it's providing more information and sort of aggregating a lot of that that content together, like schedules and pricing that you can see in one place.
Nicole?
And I think it just makes things simple. And I know for us, that's all we ever want is to try and make that purchasing experience simple. And when you can go on AI and just ask, I think it's very clear the next step is to be able to buy. So I know that's something that our company is actively working on. How do we go from the step of just being informational to actually having the ability to purchase through AI too?
Yeah, I'd just add one thing to that as well. What we've noticed, so we power suppliers' websites, rail carriers' websites. We just launched with one recently, and we've noticed the growth has been phenomenally stronger than what we expected. And our hypothesis is that AI is driving that direct-to-supplier channel, away from intermediaries and to the actual supplier, because that's where the primary data is, that's where the source is. And the AI says, well, if you want to book this train, go book this specific train. Don't necessarily go to an intermediary. So we're seeing that channel shift from intermediaries to suppliers.
That's interesting. And so what roles are maps playing as the start and the end point in ground transportation? How would you say that they're improving, if they're improving?
I think maps are most definitely improving. I think it's that dynamic feature of it now that when they see construction or when there's any issue, the map will automatically adjust. And so the way that we do it at Mozio, we're not experts in maps by any stretch, but we just use Google Maps and they have all of those features. But that ability within our system to be able to say, okay, you can write anything that goes into Google Maps. There's no more, areas or different things like that, polygons. You can just have anywhere that you want to go to any other place that you want to be. And that's it. And none of that was possible before maps. And the other big thing in ground transportation that's different now is even in pre-book systems, you want to give that ability to track your ride. And so Maps is really allowing that. So you're able to watch your driver come to you, then you're able to see, oh, well, this is where they are. And it gives that level of security to the passenger that they didn't have before. So it's essential for us.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add to that other than, it's contextually interesting. If you're on a mobile device and the mobile therefore knows where you are, then, Maps provide a lot of value. So I think it's, in terms of searching, that makes more sense if you're on a mobile. Then, starting in a map is a good place to start.
Absolutely. And so, Cameron, this is primarily a question for you. There have been calls from the EU for a single booking platform for rail in Europe. How likely do you think that is to actually happen? And what would you say are the main things that are holding it back?
So it's an interesting comment. So firstly, I'd say there is one, and it's called SilverRail. Now, so kind of what's under that comment? I think really the intent there is let's make booking trains easy. So when they say we want one booking platform, that you don't want to have multiple sites you need to go to book, to book your journey. So that, there's not only SilverRail, there's others that have booking platforms, and it's about us adding more content into our platform so you can go to, to that one place to book all of your travel. So I think all of the EU initiatives and regulations are about making rail more easy to access and more easy to purchase.
Absolutely. And so just kind of, again, taking a step back at the larger picture, what would you say are the main barriers to progress in the sector right now?
Certainly within the ground transportation area, I would say the biggest barriers are fragmentation. So it's finding ways to have quality consistent everywhere. And so something that we put in place that I think is a little bit different is that we do a quality rating system for each one of our providers in every city, so that you could have a local provider that people are not familiar with or don't know, have a quality score of a 10, but then maybe some really popular brand that everybody knows have a quality score of 7. And all of a sudden you're on an even playing field. So people are able to choose. And I think there's just more knowledge out there and more information to make those correct choices, which I think, makes it sort of gets you over that hurdle, the barrier that's currently there in quality.
Yeah, I think I'd build on the fragmentation piece. I think that's one of the key challenges because you've just got so many different options. I'm thinking of the first and last mile, sort of around the rail piece. But then on top of that, I'd say the revenue model is one of the biggest challenges. It's unclear who pays for this technology? Suppliers, certainly the smaller suppliers, they don't want to necessarily pay for distribution because it's not in their consideration set. I don't think travelers want to pay a transaction fee. So then who's going to fund the development of this space? So I think that revenue model needs to evolve actually, so that you can get more into this space. Where we've seen it work is when it's industry led, and so industry says supplier led. So by a transit authority or a government or someone like that wants to provide a better service. So that's why it's there's a project in Wales which is led by the supplier, and then they fund the development of that infrastructure and the ecosystem and the tech, and then the travelers end up benefiting from that.
Absolutely. And so I know you guys were just talking a bit about fragmentation, and maybe that's not something that there's so much control over. But in terms of, what the sector is doing, what would you say are they getting right and what are they getting wrong? And what are the primary areas of friction?
So within our portion, so not rail, because I think rail is easier in this aspect. The hardest part in ground transportation is actually meeting your driver. And this is something that the industry has really changed from even 3 years ago to now. Within ground transportation, you must provide driver information in advance so that you can call your driver or they can text you and say, hey, I've just arrived here. And the other thing that they're doing is the driver tracking. And by ensuring that you have that, for us in ground transportation, it's that meeting of the client to the driver that's the most difficult. And I think by instituting that, I think the overall experience is that much more positive.
So if I focus on rail, I think what they're getting right is also what they're getting wrong. What they're getting right is the market is liberalizing, and we're seeing new entrants which provide that. Sorry, I thought I was being talked to. That provides better pricing, better product, and then the traveler ultimately wins there. But what they're getting wrong is it's just not having fast enough. It should be we're seeing some markets that are really opened up like Italy and Spain, and some markets that aren't yet like Germany. So the faster that can happen, I think the better the travelers will benefit from.
Great. And so as we are wrapping up here, just a little bit of a forward-looking opinion or statement. What do you think next year, 2026, will look like in terms of multimodal developments?
I would say you'll start to see more tests, like Transport for Whales and their mass project, as we try to understand how consumers will interact with this and how that will change buyer behavior. Is it about booking, or is it just about information and flexibility? And what's the right model?
Yeah, and I also think there's a lot of opportunity between the different segments coming together and seeing how we can work together to create that multimodal, where it doesn't have to be one company doing it all, but having the companies merge, form sort of strategic partnerships that creates that full customer journey.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.